Hi guys, Laura here and I am up at Duncanville Bookstore, and I am sitting here with Preston Poulter from Pocket Jack Comics, and he will be here next Wednesday in store doing a signing from 4 to 7, talking about his book White Lily, and talking about where it came from and how he got interested in the story. They're also working on a second comic that will be more of a fantasy book, and he can tell you about that too. So he's going to tell you a little bit about White Lily and where the story came from, and then we hope that you'll come by on next Wednesday starting at 4 o'clock and come by and talk to him and learn about the book. Alright, so Preston, tell me a little bit about what White Lily is about.
White Lily was the aviator call sign. Like fighter pilots adopt this call sign, like I don't know if you know Top Gun, but he had Maverick.
Yeah.
But that was the aviator call sign of the highest scoring female fighter pilot in world history. So I discovered the story on accident sitting at the poker table one day, and I didn't know that women were fighter pilots previous to the modern era, but in World War II, the Soviet Union lost so many of their male fighter pilots fighting the Germans that they kind of out of necessity turned to using female fighter pilots, because you could give anyone a rifle and point them in the right direction of the enemy, but flying a plane required special training and experience. So when they lost all their men, they started turning to women, and two of them really shined, and so that's what the comic is about. It's about the two deadliest female fighter pilots in world history who fought at the battles of Stalingrad and Kursk.
Okay, and there's an interesting story about how you actually came across the story of White Lily. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, some people find that story interesting, but I was a card player, and that's why it's named Pocket Jack's Comics, because that was my favorite poker hand. But I'm a fairly tight player. I tend to fold a lot, so I have a lot of free time on my hands while I'm sitting there waiting for the next hand I'm going to play. And I remembered the punchline of a joke that my father told me when I was just a young boy, and the punchline was, "Yeah, but these fuckers was flying Messerschmitts," and it has to be done with a Scottish accent because that's what the joke plays off of. But I couldn't remember the setup to the joke. I now know it. It's honestly a bit of a letdown, but I now know the joke. So I typed that into Google in an attempt to find what the joke was, and I came across the Wikipedia profile for Lily Litviak, because the first the first bomber she shot down was a Messerschmitt, and I was fascinated to discover that the Soviet Union used female fighter pilots, and I didn't know why I'd never heard of this before. And in researching her life story, I found it was very cinematic and very emotionally moving. So I thought this would be a great story to put in some form. I initially wrote it as a screenplay, but it was tough to get Hollywood to bite on it, so ultimately I decided to make it myself as a comic book.
Okay, and you actually have a second project you're now working on. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. That one is another converted screenplay, and this one was, people were like, well, you need to write, like a horror/action script, and so I decided I would focus on a woman who can do magic in the modern world. And one of the things, and it kind of slowly evolved over time, because at the time I was living in Venice, California, I'd go to a writer's group every week. And so I'd start presenting pages from the new story and just kind of gauged off of their reaction. And my daughter became really fascinated with The Great Gatsby back when she was 14. She's 16 now. And she became really depressed over Gatsby's passing and the story. And so I said, well, you're kind of a writer. Why don't you put Gatsby in one of your stories? And we got in a bigger discussion, and I decided I would put Gatsby in mine, just on a lark. So I wrote the story of now, what if Gandalf, Harry Potter, when you get the Harry Potter world, it's kind of a Gandalf figure that's the head of the school, although they renamed it. I'm not a huge Harry Potter fan, so I can't name the guy up top. Dumbledore. So Dumbledore's kind of a Gandalf figure. We're like, well, what if it was a Gatsby figure? So the book opens with her, instead of going to Hogwarts, she's going to this big flapper party where all this crazy magical stuff is happening. It's still modern day, but wizards live a long time, and so Gatsby was huge on these parties. So she's going from room to room looking for Gatsby, which is kind of a recreation of what we see in the original novel. And then when she initially finds him, he takes her into the spirit world for her kind of job interview, and they have all these crazy adventures. And I find that when I presented these pages and when I present the concept, people really gravitate to the concept of Gatsby as a wizard. So that is what that comic is about, and it's called Guinevere and the Divinity Factory.
All right, so we hope you will come out on Wednesday from 4 to 7 to see Preston and talk about White Lily, and you can learn about his new book.
And I give away free prints. So
There you go.
This is a free print. Everybody stops by.